Welcome back today to From the Outside In. My name is Ismail Awaz. I'm the co-host of this show, and I'm with my good friend, also co-host of this show, Robin Kerner. I am in Philadelphia. He is in Seattle, and we are so delighted to be here again today to discuss something very important. It's versus Wade. I'm going to give my friend Robin a few seconds to introduce himself, and then we get going.
A few seconds to introduce myself. I haven't had much of a life then. Yes, I'm here in Seattle. I am, as you can tell from this strange speech impediment, British born, but I have been living in the United States for the better part of, I think, 18 years now, and a citizen for about 6 of them.
Well, it was a few seconds. That was well said. But I think that now people know who we are, hopefully, if they watch our other videos. If you haven't done that yet, I suggest strongly that you take some time and see what we have to offer. We don't have a lot of videos yet, but I think we have a couple of them that are very good, and hopefully you're going to enjoy them. And Robin, let me ask you this question because I think it's very important. Just before we started this show, you kind of mentioned something that is like was weird to me, but I think you have something in your mind that's going to be very interesting. You were explaining to me that there's a similarities between Roe Wade, Amber Heard, and Johnny Depp. Can you tell us more?
Yes. What do those two things have in common? Well, in short, these two cases have in common that they reveal a problem in American culture in relation to the legislative power, right? What I'm referring to is that in response to both of those cases, we've seen large numbers of people get emotionally invested in a certain outcome regardless of how the outcome is arrived at. Now, the Constitution, this country, it only all works because if and because the three powers of governance, let's say, the legislative, judicial, and executive, do what they're supposed to do. And what the the judiciary needs to be doing, the courts need to be doing, is without fear or favor, without prejudice, getting to the truth, pronouncing verdicts that are consistent with the law. And it doesn't matter if it's the Supreme Court judges doing that or a jury doing that, as in the case of the Heard Depp trial. If we care about not corrupting our system, we should not be cheering one side or another based on whether we like the state of affairs that would result as a result of a verdict. What we should care about for the preservation of our rights and indeed our democracy and the rule of law is that the right decision is made by the right process. And by the right decision, by the right process, I mean the correct application of the law based on the facts as they are. Now, if I, let us say, for example, had not read Roe versus Wade, had no understanding of the legality, the laws involved, or indeed the clauses of the Constitution that were involved in the Roe versus Wade decision, then I shouldn't be cheering an outcome because I don't know what the right or wrong outcome is. I may be, let us say, pro-choice, and therefore will feel somewhat relieved if, let us say, for example, Roe versus Wade was upheld. I may be pro-life and want to see it overturned. But I should not be rooting for one of those outcomes because of the outcome. What I need to root for is in that case, the Supreme Court doing its job. I shouldn't be trying to pressure by standing outside a judge's house or waving placards, him or her to deliver the state of affairs I like. And similarly with the Depp Heard thing, I wasn't in the room. I'm not a juror. I wasn't listening to it all. Now, I know in the United States, rather unusually, they stream cases. And so I guess you could kind of be a kind of a juror, in the audience, so to speak, right? If you have, if you're getting all the information the jury's getting, and you come, maybe you could form your own decision. Maybe that's reasonable. But if you just decide, oh, I don't know, you want her to win because you support abused women, or you want Depp to win because you're a Johnny Depp fan and like Pirates of the Caribbean. Frankly, what you're cheering for is the corruption of the rule of law. I'm very disturbed by that. I'm disturbed by the lack of awareness, education about what really is at stake when a court sits. Because what is at stake when a court sits is the fundamental corruption, if it's not doing its job properly, of everything we rely on, we care about. So, for all of our rights, whatever our views on these questions, on Depp, Heard, Roe, Wade, abortion, etc., right? That was what I meant when I mentioned to you earlier, Ismail, that these two very different cases reveal something in common, and that is the response of a significant enough segment of our American population that it worries me.
What's very interesting, Robin, I just found an article saying Johnny Depp's legal victory and the death of Roe versus Wade are part of the same toxic cultural movement. Of course, it's
I can see that.
It's an article that is done by a publication that is on the left. Not going to say, but what do you say to that based on what you just said? What do you think? I mean, I don't think it's I mean,
okay, yeah.
I think some people here are just again using an appeal to emotion here, trying to kind of tie that with feminist activism, and instead of, again, like you just said, trying to really see the legal and the judiciary system here that is doing its job, right? So is it because Americans have become some Americans have become too emotional and cannot have that rational line of thoughts about our institutions and the role of this institution, and it has to they have to take everything about race, about the opposition between men and women. I'm not sure how to say that, but those social cultural issues, they cannot get out of this lens. They see the world through this lens, even though sometimes there's not that. This is just purely a judiciary, an institutional issue here. Does it make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, I think I get your question. I mean, certainly it is the case that people who are caught up in certain, let us say, culture war issues can be very passionate. I mean, I get extremely passionate about free speech, let us say, which now, astonishingly, probably is a culture war issue, which itself is a devastating indictment of where we've arrived at. But that's my opinion. Right?
But Robin, you and I on the abortions, if I hope it's not an issue if I say that, but you and I, we mostly on. I mean, I don't think I can say I'm pro abortion. I despise abortion, but I also believe that there's a limited right to a woman to make that decision. And hold on, I lost my thought. Yes, so what you and I do, this is what I want to say. We understand, I think, very well that being in favor of overturning Roe versus Wade doesn't mean that we are against abortion. Doesn't mean that we are pro-life. I mean, if it's, I wouldn't say that pro-life.
Pro-life is defined by certain people. Yeah.
Pro-birth. I don't know, because I want to help all the lives that possible, but I also think of the life of the mother so many times. But anyways, it's another issue. But we both agreed that Roe versus Wade overturning, it's nothing to do with abortion as far as the issue of giving that the right to abort for women, right? It's about making sure the right institution have the power back to legislate on that right, right? This is what I'm
Right.
trying
So
to say.
yeah.
So
So let me kind of pull all that together, and
yeah,
because you
yeah,
said a
yeah,
few things I need
yep,
to respond
yep,
to
yep,
together.
yep, yep, yep.
So first of all, yeah, just to be clear, my view on abortion, I don't like laying my opinions out when I'm not asked, but here we are. So my view on abortion is at least, let me just say this, I would like to see legal access to safe abortions in the United States everywhere. That would be where I landed. So by most definitions, that would make me pro-choice. Do I think we need to reduce the number of abortions? Do I think yes, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Do I acknowledge that most abortions are had for reasons that are nothing to do with health, nothing to do with
Elective.
a violation, etc.? I acknowledge all of that, but I do not want to be locking women up for having abortions. That's something I could not countenance. So that makes me pro-choice. Now, so in a naive way, I should be happy about the state of the country if Roe versus Wade is maintained. However, you also mentioned to me, Ismail, earlier about this headline where, oh, this and that are the result of toxicity and da-da-da. If you're going to make a claim like that, then what you're doing is taking a kind of a partisan position on the culture wars, and you are throwing dirt. You are making an accusation. You are imputing intent, ill intent, right, to people who don't agree with you, essentially, right? Who might want to see Roe versus Wade overturned, who might not wanted to have seen Depp make out with whatever it was, 15 million, and Heard make out with 2, or whatever it was, right? You're throwing dirt. Now, the reason I find that headline, I disagree with it, and I would go further, I find it kind of unacceptable, is that I don't actually think a reasonable, intellectually honest person who has read Roe versus Wade and has read the draft opinion that we're implicitly discussing here by Alito, that would, if it was published by the court, overturn Roe versus Wade, and say, oh yeah, this is toxicity playing out. This is anti-woman, or this is anti-reproductive rights. I am for what are called reproductive rights, as I've just indicated. I am for safe legal abortions, the availability of those. But I also, at the moment, this is a holding position, and I'm prepared to change my mind. But at the moment, having read Roe versus Wade and the opinion against it, I would like to see it overturned. And the reason I would like to see it overturned is, well, there are many that we can discuss further right here, right now. But I think the reason that Alito's draft opinion, drives a train through Roe versus Wade on the specifics is, as that opinion says, because of how it was decided. Now, I don't have skin in the game. I'm not a lawyer, but I suppose I do have skin in the game because I would like to see safe legal abortion. So the skin in the game, should make me be uneasy, as I am uneasy, of a situation where this issue is returned to the legislators. Now, but that is where the issue belongs. Alito rightly says, in my opinion, and I think any honest person would have to admit he's got a point, if they read Roe versus Wade, that the specificity of the opinion in Roe versus Wade, which divides pregnancies up into trimesters and finds different rights attached to different trimesters of pregnancy, and then claims that division of a pregnancy into 3 equal parts is somehow found in the Constitution. I mean, when you say it, it's absurd on its face. And Alito and many others make the point. And even actually at the time of Roe versus Wade, many people who were pro-choice made this same point, that it's clearly legislating from the judicial bench. And if you read it, it reads like a law, not like a legal opinion. And now, again, I'm not a legal expert, but I do love reading Supreme Court opinions. It is something I do, and especially these big, important ones. And so I have become increasingly concerned over the last couple of years, for sure, about this reading things into the law that aren't there. And I think the Supreme Court has been doing that too much. Let me put it that way. Recently, and I'll give another example, and then I'll pause. Another example recently was a case where an employer was found guilty of discrimination under a law that forbids discrimination on the basis of gender and sex. He was found guilty under that law for essentially discriminating against a transgender employee. He didn't want to have, I can't remember the details of it, but he didn't want to have a transgender employee public facing representing his business. And this employer said, look, I'm not discriminating based on gender or sex, because I have the same position on transgenderism regardless of the gender or the sex of the individual involved. Now, that seems to be a logical position. We may not agree with it, but it's not unreasonable. My point is, it's not internally inconsistent. Let me put it that way. But if you read the case where this this employer was found guilty of discrimination, they do all this contorted logic to say that this law that doesn't forbid discrimination on the basis of whether someone is trans or cisgendered actually does. Now, it wasn't there. They found it. They essentially, in my opinion, having read the opinion, they made that law up. Now, we don't need to do that. We should have a law against discrimination against transgender individuals. Yes, I think we should have a law making sure that women have legal access to safe abortions. That's what I believe, but it's not the job of the justices to make that law. And as soon as we say it is, we're in 9 kinds of trouble. That's my position.
I understand very much your position. I think I agree with the position about the Supreme Court not making laws. And unfortunately, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've seen in the past where even the Supreme Court's kind of changing the law. You know, earlier you say something that people should cheer for the right decision and the right process. But sometimes, the right process, it's the Supreme Court. What they cheer as being the right process is when the Supreme Court take a position. And as you said, I don't believe the Supreme Court. It's to make a law to change it, to say it's constitutional or it is not, and here's why. Right.
And to be clear, the Supreme Court's job requires them to be logically consistent and consistent with the law as written, or to be fair to them, let's say, as they honestly interpret it. And obviously, I can acknowledge that there are justices on the Supreme Court, maybe whose politics differ from mine, or maybe not, who might read a law and interpret it differently, that there are reasonable arguments of legal interpretation, and that is why we have 9 Supreme Court judges and not 1. And that is fine. But I do believe you can read an opinion and read a dissent, and you can often find if an honest reading of the law is what's motivating it, or even if you disagree with it, or if something else is motivating it. And that something else is the thing that bugs me, because I think I see it too often.
Let me move on to another question. Actually, not another question. I think I want you to see this. It's part of the article I was just mentioning, and they say, here's where the reaction leaves us. Currently, our legal system seems to be on the brink of recognizing neither women's right to control their bodies, nor women's right to speak about the violence that has been done to their bodies. Again, that they try to make that connection between Roe Wade's Wade and Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. But basically, once again, I think it's not rational what they say about the fact that our legal system is on the brink of not recognizing the woman's right to control their own body. I don't think this is the issue here. The issue is a legal standpoint. Is that when Roe and Wade was ruled, if I can say like this, that was a bad ruling. And now people are taking a look at that ruling and say there's nothing that is consistent with the Constitution, and we should overturning and leave the right to the state. However, my second part of my question is that I I'm going to make I'm going to make I'm going to acknowledge something. I've always claimed that I was a pro-constitution and pro-bill of rights, and for most of part I am, until I realized that I didn't know about the Ninth Amendment. And the Ninth Amendment says that it ensured that the Bill of Rights was not seen as granting to the people of the United States only the specific rights it addressed. So I'm going to read it. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage other retained by the people. What prevent then the federal legislators, Congress and senators, to make a law to legalize abortion? Can they do that based on this Ninth Amendment, or am I completely out of touch? And what does the Ninth Amendment means in the context of the abortion and Roe and Wade?
Yeah, no. So I would say the answer to your question is not only can they, but they must make a law to govern the issue of abortion. And the Supreme Court is saying, go do it. That's your job. And it is their job. Making a law is the job of legislators. The clue is in the name, right? And we vote for those legislators to enact laws that let's say legitimately. I don't think the Ninth Amendment, I don't think you need to call on the Ninth Amendment to recognize that that's the job of the legislators to do, to make a law saying, there shall be legal access to abortions. Or it might be framed, there shall not be legal access to abortions under certain conditions, right? So once the fetus is a certain age. The point of the Ninth Amendment is that it just says, look, we listed a bunch of your rights, but just because we missed some doesn't mean you don't have them. You have all of the ones you were born with, whatever they are, whether we even know what they are, right? So it just reinforces the fact that the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is not the legal basis for the granting of rights. There is no granting of rights. The Constitution merely recognizes that you're born with natural rights, and it constrains the ability of the government to impinge on them. It's a constraining document, not a granting document.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And the Ninth Amendment, which is kind of one of my faves, it's one of my faves because it's completely fundamental, it's completely universal, and 9 amendments in, it's reminding everybody what we're doing here. Don't forget that. And if you go back to the discussion, sorry, go ahead.
No, finish your thought. Okay.
I mean, one of the core arguments between the people that wanted this constitution and did not, Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers, was with respect to whether we should have a Bill of Rights, was precisely that. Hold on, we shouldn't, said some, because if we do enumerate them, whatever we say about what we're doing, in the future, people will go, we can take that right away from you because it was not in the Bill of Rights. So, in other words, the Ninth Amendment is kind of a response to that internal argument among the founders who were trying to work out whether we should even have a Bill of Rights as part of the Constitution.
So I'm a bit confused, I'm going to be honest with you, because I thought that if Roe Wade was overturned, then that right goes back to the state to legislate, right?
Well, hold on. It's not that the right goes back to the state.
Okay, go ahead.
the setting of the rule goes to the state. So, for example, right, we could say under the Constitution that the rights that are afforded to a fetus, and therefore by implication to the woman carrying the fetus, because those would be in tension under certain circumstances, is determined by whether or not the Constitution actually applies to a fetus. In other words, is a fetus a person? Now, you could say that's what it turns on, right? Now, how do we know what a person is? Well, you can't really see the answer to that in the Constitution. Should we make a law governing abortion by defining personhood, which will then maybe trigger the application of the idea of natural rights that the Constitution is concerned with? We could, or we could just simply make a law saying when abortion is legal and illegal, which is pretty much what happens in every other country, and what has to happen in America, because the only way you can let me put it this way: Roe versus Wade didn't settle down the abortion issue in this country, right? It didn't do that. It did the opposite. And the reason it did the opposite is precisely because, and I say this as a pro-choice person, the basis on which the outcome I like was delivered is full of holes, it seems to me. I mean, and it seems obviously to many other people. And by the way, if you look at the history of this, the cases that follow Roe versus Wade, but that bore on it, such as Casey, right, which is a very important case in the history of this, itself, you can see, rejected the basis of the Roe versus Wade decision. So even these other cases that upheld the Roe versus Wade equilibrium rejected the basis on which Roe versus Wade was found, was ruled. So of course there are problems, and it needs to be tidied up. And the way to fairly, justly, and democratically and stably tidy it up is to have our democratically elected representatives make the laws like we have them make all other laws, and then the Supreme Court's job is to interpret them.
So I have another question for you before we close this show for today. But we see a lot of people being extremely emotional and upset about what we think it's going to be likely a overturn of Roe versus Wade. And based on the conversation we just had, the Ninth Amendment, the role that a federal government can have, what do you think should be done for the right of abortion going back at the federal level? Is there anything that can be done, or do you think that that's something that should be ruled by the states? What from your opinion, is the best avenue here? Because a lot of people think that the overturning of Roe versus Wade can really create a deep conflict in America that really is going to have that snowball effect, right? With everything that's going on right now. So again, I don't have very much an opinion about this one. I'm still learning about all of this. That's why I'm asking you. Do you think that there's a role for the federal level, for the federal government to try to pass a law to legislate and the right of abortion at the federal level, or should it be left to the states?
I'm prepared to be corrected on this, because I might be at the limit of my knowledge here, but I don't think there's any constitutional, moral, legal reason why the federal government should not try, Congress should not try to pass a law parameterizing abortion. And if we have a working system, judicial system, which I'm arguing for here, if I were wrong about that, indeed, if the federal government were wrong about that, the states can then take the federal government to court, right, and get the power back. Now, obviously, by default, the power is with the states. By default, the power is with the states. And the federal government only has the right to legislate on those issues that under the Constitution have been granted to the federal government. And I like prima facie, I don't think abortion would be one, right? I don't think so. But I bet some clever legal scholar who knows more than I do, maybe could make the argument, and I would assess it when I'd heard it. But look, homicide, murder, these things are covered at the state level. So if that is, I think abortion has to be. I think the only way around that might be what we mentioned earlier, in the definition of personhood, that maybe that could be done at the federal level in some way that would then influence the application of the Constitution. But even then, and therefore, if we define personhood at the federal level, the fetus, we could then determine which fetuses, let's say, are persons, and then, that would determine what rights are due to those people. Obviously, the right to life, but that would be very hard to do, right? Because because then really, if you do that, by implication, you've got to understand what the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to pursue happiness, and indeed all the other enumerated rights in the Bill of Rights mean for a fetus. And I'm not even sure you could do that at 8 months. So okay, this is a long answer and I'm thinking aloud. I suspect then what that really means is, it's a question for the states. And then more generally, then the answer to what should be done, if we apply that question to the people, because at the end of the day, we get the government, we get the law that we deserve, that we fight for, we get the rights that we fight for. Our job is to calmly, without blowing up churches and without blowing up family planning clinics, to have the discussion that we haven't properly had in a democratic milieu, precisely because Roe versus Wade shut it down. So it's an overdue discussion, right? It's a discussion that we might have had in the 70s and 80s. And state by state, people need to make their case. Now, I am certainly concerned. I am, like, in my gut, concerned for women in these deep red states that are going to need to cross state lines to get an abortion, if in the worst case. Now, I'm not sure that would be the worst case as this plays out. I'm not convinced that, let's say, draconian anti-abortion laws, which mean person at conception, which I don't think, by the way, is scientifically supportable, and we could have a whole other discussion about that in another show. For various reasons, I'd be happy to discuss. But even if such a law was, instituted in, say, Mississippi or Alabama or somewhere like that, I'm not sure that the people would wear it, even though they're deep red states, conservative, religious, so on. I think the pendulum would start to swing back once the consequences are felt. I don't know. That would be also a topic for another show, because then we're really talking about, American culture around this and other issues.
Before I close that, I need to ask you another question, because it comes to my mind, those questions as you speak. We have a 10th Amendment, though. And I think it goes with what you said. The 10th Amendment says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the state respectively, or to the people.
People, yes. You're right, and that's the answer right there. Where I said, that's the one that reminds us that, like I said, the Ninth Amendment reminds us that just because the right isn't listed here, it doesn't mean you don't have it, people. The 10th Amendment reminds us that all of the rights that we haven't explicitly given to, or the privileges, let's say, to the federal government reside in the states. Remember this. We forget this all the time, especially in arguments about voting for the president and the electoral college and the Constitution and the composition of the Senate. People forget the following. The contracting parties to the Constitution are the states. The Constitution is signed by the states, right? So They are sovereign. They are there. They therefore are sovereign, and also they. I think I could say as cause and as effects of that fact, they are sovereign. So yeah, it's always the burden of proof in the taking of power is always on the federal government and not on the states, and that's kind of the magic, if you want to say it that way, of the American system of governance. Because look, let's say like you're like me and you're pro-choice, and some Republican hard right person, gets into the presidency with a supportive Republican Congress and Senate. Then, when they pass the law that bans abortion, nobody in America is getting abortion. That's it. It's over. At least if, let's say, one of the deep southern states tries it, that in the worst case, you can get on a bus and go across state lines. And by the way, I would certainly support charities, nonprofits that helped poor women who needed abortions to do that within reasonable parameters. By the way, also, this reminds me, this whole case right now, that we have. The nation has seen the draft opinion by Alito 4 that would, if it's published, overturn Roe versus Wade. This was triggered by a case against a state that only wanted to set a limit on abortion at 15 weeks. Only 15 weeks. Now, as a pro-choice person, that to me seems reasonable. It does not seem unreasonable. And the idea, and let's just be clear what Alito's opinion really says then, with respect to the case at issue. It says that you cannot find in the Constitution a prohibition at setting at 15 weeks, but also a necessity at setting at least one trimester. Right. Well, of course you can't find that in the Constitution. I mean, you're literally all you're doing is shifting the line by a few weeks to say, oh, the Constitution says you can't shift it here, but you have to have it. I mean, it's absurd on its face. And this is what I mean about us having to bring intellectual honesty and basic logic to the Constitution and to the law as written. And it's entirely appropriate, just to kind of go round the circle one more time, it's entirely appropriate. It is right, as in every other nation happens, for elected representatives to pass a law to set that line. And we can have the argument, we should have the argument, because America is a morally serious nation, about where we set that line and why. But I'm sorry, 15 weeks is not crazy. That is not rampant, rightist, conservative. It's not that.
It depends where you're coming from. I mean, obviously, for people on the right, on the conservative side, because you can be on the right and not conservative. It's a big deal because they believe that, I believe that life starts at conception, but they believe because the life starts at conception, then you should never abort, even if you're a victim of rape or incest. And that's, to me, something I'm very struggling with. But it's for another discussion. I want to say thank you, Robin, for spending the time today to really explain all of this. Thank you to you watching this video. Please make sure that you are giving us a like and that you're sharing this video. Feel free to leave a comment. And I wanted to say something also that I don't want to forget. Robin, you made a video a long time ago, if I'm not mistaken, about the issue of abortion. Yeah. I found that video very profound, very interesting. You were talking to some, I think, pretty much conservative group of people.
It was it's a group of religious conservatives in rural Washington state.
Yep, and I think this video was a great video. If you have time, I'm going to put the link in the description, and take the time to look at the video. We may one day make a video about the issue of abortion. It's to me, it's still a complicated issue. I'm still learning about it, and I'm still trying to. I think it's complicated and complex subject that you just cannot solve with just one just one idea, right? But we also, I think, one day we're going to just to give up, people watching us. We want also to discuss something that Robin just mentioned, is how we can start having conversation. Is this possible? Robin and I, we created something. I mean, Robin especially created something we call humanitarian. It's about how people can start talking to each other about issues, political issues, cultural issues. Are we going to be able to do that when we see what's going on? I don't know, but it's going to be maybe our next video. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching this video. Let us know what you think about it, and we would love to read your comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ismay.